Okay, I'm going to continue with the drawing, and we're moving into the pattern creation phase. And what I've done is I've just created a new layer right here, which we're going to draw the pattern on. Here's the shirt layer, and I'm just going to switch that off. So we just have a blank area in which to work. I'm just going to hide the layers for now. I've got my color panel open, and for this one I want to explore the use of brushes instead. So we're going to go here, and one thing you'll notice, there's a couple of brushes there that we'll look at, and we've got the paintbrush and the blob brush tool. Let's take a look at the blob brush tool first off, because it's kind of cool. It's very much like finger painting. So let's choose our color. I'm choosing I think I'm going to try and make a squid here. Let's see if you can figure out what the theme is. Sort of choose a squid-like pink, and notice it's black stroke, pink fill for now. So I'm just going to take this brush. I'm going to use the blob brush, and you'll notice the blob brush has a certain size. Now that can be controlled. If we double click that blob brush, we can change its fidelity, meaning if you've got a lot of jagged little movements, it'll translate those. Or you can have it really smooth things out, all depending on where you set this. I'm just going to set it in the center just to begin. You can have this thing be angled. You can alter the size. You can even change the dimensions so that it's like a chiseled kind of calligraphic pen. Anyway, I'm going to keep mine, for the time being, just perfectly circular. And if I go out here, I can see how large that brush is. And that's pretty good for now. And let's see what color it actually uses. So you'll notice as I start painting, it's using the stroke color. And it flips. Remember, we had pink here and black stroke. So that's important for us to keep in mind, that the stroke color is the thing that we need to watch out for. So let's just start that again. I've got our blob brush. We'll choose a pink stroke, and there we go. We start painting. Now this is just like finger painting, like you're spreading the paint color around, and you'll notice there's little areas in here that if we go over it again, it fills it in. Notice that it's active. It's not deselected. And that means if I continue painting, it assumes I want to add to that at any time. You can see that it continues to add to it. Now, if I were to use this eraser tool down here just below the blob brush tool, it works in a similar fashion. Again, we can double click it. We can change its roundness and its angle and its size. And I'm okay with that right now. And we can subtract chunks from it. So we have a lot of play here that we can work with in order to sculpt our shapes. Super intuitive, easy to use. So that's the blob brush tool in conjunction with the eraser tool. Let's just keep that in mind. The next tool is the paintbrush tool, and again, like most tools, when you double click them, you can establish how they're going to respond to what you're doing on your trackpad or with your mouse or tablet. And we're keeping this selected so that we will continue to draw as we make more and more paint strokes. And we can fill the new brush strokes. If there's a fill color, I'm not going to use that. I just want the strokes to carry the colors. And I'm okay with these defaults as they are. The next thing we want to do is set the size of that brush. And right now it's set at 5-point round. Well, at any time we can alter that. Again, once we get in here, we can generate a new brush. So this is our listing of brushes. These are the defaults. It's pretty limited. You know, you have these different sizes, and they're being applied in a uniform way. And you'll notice at any time we can create a new brush. Or if we double click an existing brush, we can edit that and make changes to its size, its roundness, its angle, or we can do it live right on here. And we can make the brush lay itself down randomly or at fixed durations or random towards the end. You can play with all of these things just to see how they behave. Play is the best way to learn. Now, you can use what's there, you can modify what's there, or you create your own brush from scratch. And you can say, I'm going to create a new brush, and there are a number of other ones that you can create here depending on whether or not you have a tablet. You can also create bristle brushes and pattern brushes, which have very different qualities. I'm going to stick with a calligraphy brush, and I'm going to click OK, and I can call this Squidward. And I can set its size, so it's fairly large, and I'm just going to go with that. And so when I use that brush, once again, I'm going to put the fill in green. I'm using the brush. Notice it's using the stroke color. Very large. Now watch what happens if I go back to Squidward. So I've saved this thing, and I double click it, and I make a change. I alter its size and make it very small. And if I click OK, it's going to give me a warning saying, hey, do you want to revert back and apply that to all the stuff that you've already drawn, or do you just want to leave them as is? So there you can see it changed it to the new stroke width that I established, and so you can kind of edit existing artwork and make changes retroactively. There are other types of brushes. So right now there's some defaults that you can see there, but if you look at the bottom of your brush palette, you will notice this one, by the way, is brought in by Adobe Capture. Somebody captured some material and it was brought in as a denim seam. So you could literally paint with that denim. Here, under brush libraries, I want to look at artistic brushes. And I want to look at artistic paintbrush. No, watercolor. Let's go with that. So in using the watercolor, I need to select from this library the type of watercolor paints that I want. And when I do that, it's going to add it in up here to my palette of existing brushes. So if I select this and this, try this and this, these things are automatically added in here to your palette. So explore, see what brushes are in that library. There's all kinds of very interesting ones. Decorative, scatter, floral patterns. Look at all this crazy stuff here that you could explore and see what some of that stuff does. A lot of interesting little graphics that might come in handy at some point. Sure, let me try that one. I'm going to give that a shot. And maybe even that one and that one. So load up on some brushes and then just experiment with them. So again, if you double click a brush, you can alter its characteristics and then give it a new name. There's a thing here called scale proportionately, which is kind of interesting. And if you set that on, when you start drawing, and again, use your stroke color, when you start drawing with that brush, if you make large strokes, the brush thickness will be very large. If you make small strokes, the brush in turn will be very small. Now, keep in mind that you've also got the ability to change the color of these brush strokes just by picking a different stroke color. And then, in turn, you can create different sorts of overlays using your opacity menu. So keep that in mind. Try some different blend modes. There's multiply, color burn, darken. Yeah, I'm not getting a lot there. Let's try exclusion. Very sort of limited arrangements. Let me just check my layering order here. That's why nothing's happening. This is below. I need to move that paint stroke above. There we go. Now we can see the different blend modes. I wondered why that wasn't working. So we can try multiply, we can try darken, color burn, and lighten. You can see these very different color on color interactions. Color dodge, overlay, soft light, and so on. Again, experiment with these things. The other thing in the appearance panel that you might want to experiment with is the effects. Try some of those. I'm going to use some Gaussian blur, or maybe even some radial blur. So I'm going to use a spin method, where it's literally going to spin the object, and you can determine the amount of spin, and it spun that object and created a smudgy kind of blur. I can always go back and edit that and increase it. And now you can see that it's almost completely eradicated it. It's so blurry now. Again, you can remove these effects. You can change them. Maybe I'll change that to a zoom blur. Let's see what that does. That's very, very different. Radial blur, zoom method. Let's just lessen that. Or you can just remove them, just like this. It removes that special effect. Okay, so again, it's experimentation time. You've got two different tools that work in two very different ways. So I'm going to just start drawing. I'm going to try and create an illustration on a theme that I'm going to continue. Now, once you've mixed a color, it's always a good idea. I'm just going to tear the color panel off. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to add that color in to my color swatches. Let's just stretch that. I'm going to drag it all the way down here. I've added it in. There it is. I could put them all in a folder if I wanted to keep them organized. And, there's a folder full of bright colors, another one full of grays, and so on. So you can use those folder structures to help keep your color themes organized. And that way I can always come back and reference it, and I don't have to eyeball it and guess. So here we are. I'm just going to work on my first creation. And remember, it stays selected. And I'm just painting it so that it's a solid. Right now it's kind of treating it like two separate objects. There we go. And I know that my squid is going to have eyes down here. And there we go. And I want tentacles for my squid. Maybe I'll use the brush tool for the tentacles. So again, we need to choose the type of brush that we're going to use. And we can create a new one if need be. Or I'm just going to use these watercolors. They look kind of cool. Oops. Man Z. I applied that as a stroke around that object, and that's not what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to do Command or Control Z on a PC. I need to actually click on a blank area of the screen. So I held down the Command key to toggle to the selection tool, clicked on the white area, it deselected this. Okay, so now I want to apply, make sure I set the stroke up, and I want to now use this brush. That's not bad. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we have it. Best to create your work large, and then you can make it smaller later on. And so I think we have a total of 8 tentacles. So 3, we'll go 4 on this side. And of course there would be some on the back end. Here's a neat thing. You can select an object and you can say draw behind. So I've selected the draw behind function. And again, I'm going to be drawing behind that. And so you can see these things in the background. Now, I'm going to want to, I think, kind of give it a sense that it's in motion. Maybe even send all of these. I'm going to send this to the front. A nice little shortcut, Command right bracket, brings things up towards the front, just like that. And then I want to put the eyeballs in there, so just little circles would be fine. Probably would be a good idea to use a reference. I need a darker version of that color, so let me just select it, add in some darker value. There we go. All right, now the problem is it's drawing it behind because I still have that drawing mode in place. Interesting. So I'm going to have to bring it all the way up. There we go. You can see it in the layers panel. So there's the one eye. On top of that, I'm going to draw another circle. I'll just zoom right in for that. Option, and then Shift, and I'm going to make this even darker. So really crank it down like that. There, I've got one eye. There's a squid eye. I can select those two things. I'm going to hold the Shift key down, target them both here, And I'm going to group them. And then I can call that, well, that's actually its right eye, right? And now because that's a group, I can duplicate it just by dragging down there. So I've now got a duplicate, and we'll call that left eye. And I can move that duplicated group over here. And there we go. I'm going to make, whatever adjustments are necessary to get that looking right. I can rotate it a little. Give it a little bit of an expression. Slightly worried because of the tilt of the eyes. Other things. So let's take that. Command 0. There's my squid. Okay, well, usually squids have pointy heads from what I recall. So let's just go in there and we'll make some adjustments. Now, because this is the blob tool, I could use the eraser tool, right? And work it that way. Oops. Yeah, it looks like there's extra stuff in there. There we go. Got rid of it. Command Z. Again, back to the blob brush. I can add the stuff back in. If I didn't quite get it. Oh, see how it's not adding to it? Let's try that. Okay, now it is. It has to be active. And then all I want to do is just add that little bit back in there. Go back to that eraser tool. And then back here, do the same thing. Okay. Again, I can smooth. Remember our smooth tool? All right. Pull that smooth tool out and smooth out Squidward. And remember, we can also use our direct selection tool, that's that white arrow, and we can stretch things and move points around. Right? We can even use our pen tool and subtract using the delete anchor point tool. If we've got too many anchor points, let's get rid of some. And then we can go back to our direct selection tool and just adjust the positioning of points, adjust their curvature, so that we get something that we're happy with in the end. So there's my squid. Typically they have those little fins on the end. I suppose I could put those on, but this is going to be shrunken down at some point into my pattern. I just wanted to show you how simple it would be experimenting with brushes. And remember, you've learned a lot about gradients as well. So you could start playing with gradients. Drag that color, that fill color down, remove it, and now we're adding gradients. I could make it a radial gradient and use the gradient tool to establish a kind of glow from underneath. And maybe instead of white, we'll choose a different color. We'll go back to our color, make sure it's CMYK, and I'll put in a warmer glow. So we now have our squid, and I can select all of that, group it together. Nice keyboard shortcut, Command-G or Control-G on a PC. And so now we have a squid. So how do we make a pattern out of that? Well, before I even do that, I just want to add some water flourishes in there. So again, with that paintbrush tool, let's select that, and we will use just a normal brush. So we'll use basic as our brush. Then we'll go back and we'll choose one of these other ones. And instead of having it paint in a gradient like it's trying to do there, I want to just make it normal. Because it's putting a gradient over top of a watercolor which already has tonal range in it. So I need to make it solid. See, right now it was applying a radial gradient to the stroke. That made it look weird. Okay, so for there, I like that color. I'm just going to play with some of that and see what that gets us. And let's change it so it's non-uniform. So I've got it tapering on both ends. So going here and changing it to a different width profile. So we get these what are called sinusoidal curves with tapered ends. I kind of like that. But maybe I need to play with my blend mode somewhat. So again, opacity, let's try multiply. Ooh, I kind of like that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to use to make my pattern. So I'm going to select all of that. Now one thing to know, when you scale something up or you scale something down, you want the widths to change relatively. And you need to make the pattern artwork small enough so that it fits in an appropriate manner on the shirt. So let me just bring my shirt artwork back so we have a sense of what's actually going on there. That's small enough now to make a significant impact as a pattern. Good. So I like that. And that's a size that I could use. I'm going to select that now. And this is what I'm going to use to generate my pattern. And the way I do that is by going to Object, Pattern, Make. And what that does is it automatically generates a pattern. It adds a little pattern swatch in your swatches panel. And now we can play, we can give it a name. Squid. And the squid's on a grid. And we can do it as bricks in a row. Notice how it's now staggered. We can also do hex patterns. And hex by row. Gives us a slightly different thing. So this is the migration of the squid. And we've got a few things here to consider. Right now, I can modify this artwork at any time. And I can move it. And you'll notice that the pattern adjusts based on the movement I made in the artwork. If I go to this thing here, I'm flipping the function to deal with the pattern tile. So this is the tile on which the pattern's being set. And you'll notice I can make that smaller. And if I make it small enough, these things will actually begin to overlap. Ooh, that's kind of cool. I like that. I like it a lot. And I can also control whether or not I size the tile to the art. So if I did that, everything would resize to fit that tile. Command or Control Z to undo the last thing. Or move tile with the art. So if I moved my artwork, the tile would also move along with it. And when things overlap, I can determine which things go in front. And here, so far, the leftmost object stacks at the highest order. And also, the topmost object is in the highest order. But you can flip these things around, and it will change the look sometimes. I'm not seeing a significant change here. But at any rate, there you have a pattern. Play with it until you're happy with it, and when you're happy with it, what you will do is you will just say, done. Boom. Now we don't even need this squid anymore. We can throw it out because I'm just going to save my file. Good idea to do that every once in a while because we have our pattern down here. It's already saved. So what does that mean? Well, that means I can start applying my pattern to my shirt. So I can select this, apply that swatch to it. Oops, look at that. I accidentally applied the pattern to the stroke. Just going to do Command Z. Make sure you have the fill component. Now before I do this, I want to open up the appearance panel and show you something in there. So let's open up that appearance panel. Just going to tear that off. And we've got our layers down here. Our color panel. Let's just throw these over here so they're out of the way. All right. Now, remember that a single object can have multiple appearances. And what I'm going to do with this particular section is I'm going to duplicate its fill. I'm going to duplicate it so it actually has two fills. But this top fill, I'm going to apply the pattern. So in order to make that happen, I need my swatches open. I'm going to tear that off, close everything else. And now I apply the squid pattern to the top layer. So you see I've retained the background blue, but I've put the squid layer on top. And now I'm going to do that to the rest. Duplicate the fill and then apply the pattern. Select that, duplicate the fill, apply the pattern, and so on until every single element has a duplicate fill with a pattern on the very top fill. Duplicate, apply the squid pattern. Duplicate, apply the squid pattern. Select that piece, duplicate the fill, apply the squid pattern. And then duplicate the fill, apply the squid pattern. And we just keep doing that until we're completely finished with all the elements. Duplicate, apply squid, duplicate, apply the squid pattern, and this final piece, duplicate and apply the squid pattern. We've now got it all applied, but you will notice the pattern all lines up, and that never happens in the real world. So how are we going to make it look more like the real world? Well, I'm going to select this sleeve, and I'm going to make sure that I've selected this under the appearance panel. I've selected this fill, not the bottom fill, the top fill. because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this thing right here, the rotate tool. And the rotate tool works kind of like a push pin. Imagine I stick a pin right here just by clicking down right there. That means it's going to rotate around that point. Then I'm going to hold the tilde key down. It's the little squiggle key to the left of the number 1, just under your what should be your escape key. But you'll look for it. It's a little squiggle. And look at that. I'm holding the tilde key down, and it's allowing me to rotate that. Okay, let's select this piece. Now these line up perfectly, this and this. So with this piece, I'm going to hold down the tilde key, and I'm going to use the arrow key to offset the pattern. See how it's offsetting vertically? It doesn't line up perfectly. And that's what we want. We want to mimic the real world. Okay, over to this sleeve. It's taking its time to move all of those elements. If your pattern is very, very complex, I've got a pretty powerful laptop, and you can see all of those movements I've asked it to perform. It's taking a while for it to compute. So, word of advice, quit all your other programs. Like actually quit them, Command Q. Even reboot your computer from scratch to free up the memory. Okay, so I selected this sleeve. I will use the rotate tool. Just click down anywhere there. Hold down the tilde key and rotate that sleeve. If I don't do that, I actually rotate the entire sleeve, and that's not what you want to do. Ooh, I've created some issues here. What's going on there? Look at that, I accidentally moved that. Whoa, don't want that. So, got to make sure I move that back into position. That was close. Okay. Now, I would continue to do that for the entire piece. Just selecting, make sure in the appearance panel it's the top pattern fill, and then you can either use the tilde key with the arrows to offset horizontally and vertically. So I'm doing both here, and it's taking its sweet time to process that. And then we'll select this piece. Again, I'm going to also make another duplicate for this one. This is the interior piece right here. And to make it look lighter, I'm going to duplicate this fill. But instead of having it fill, so we've got 3 fills on this. The background blue, the pattern. We've got a copy of the pattern, but I just want to make that white. Now, I don't want it white looking like that. I want to use the appearance panel on this and change the opacity of the fill. I'm going to change it to overlay. And see, it makes it look like the interior, the reverse side of the fabric. And that's pretty cool. I like that. Okay, so we'll select this. Again, tilde key. I'll just put it to the left a few times so nothing lines up. Again, with this, tilde key, move left. We can see it doesn't line up. And we're just ensuring that this is mimicking the imperfections of the real world. And for this, I just want to make sure we've got that properly lined up. And we've applied our patterns to everything. That's probably lining up a little too nicely for me. Perfection to me is an ideal. It doesn't really exist. Ooh, look at that. I've done way too much. And the problem is I'm moving the epaulette. I'm not actually moving the pattern. So again, this is the problem. I need to make sure I have the pattern selected, then hold the tilde key down and move the pattern. Because I didn't have that pattern layer selected, it assumed I just wanted to move. It's doing it again, probably because I took my finger off. There we go. I think that's good. And we'll stop there. You've created a pattern, experimented with some different types of brushes, and you've applied that, you created the pattern, played with its different arrangements, clicked done when you were finished, then applied the pattern to an object. But first of all, you selected that object, and then you selected its fill, and then you duplicated that fill, and then changed that secondary fill, the one on the top, and applied your pattern, which resides now in your swatches panel. And then you use the tilde key in conjunction. When I did the sleeves, I think rotating them makes the most sense to me. I used the rotate tool with the tilde key in order to rotate that. So lots of learning in applying that. Good luck to everyone, and we'll see you in the lab. Command S, and I'm out.